Welcome to the Spurs Roundtable, powered by Project Spurs. I'm your host, Jeff Garcia, and it is the doldrums of the NBA season, especially for the San Antonio Spurs. But there's a little stuff to talk about, namely Jimmer. Right, guys? No? No, I don't know. They're anti. Somebody's here anti-Jimmer. I think it's Paul, right? Well, anyway, this is Paul Garcia and Winston Harris, also of ProjectSpurs.com. But gentlemen, here it is, the slow period of the NBA, where things are just going to be grinding out. The Spurs seemingly are done, at least forming the roster. We talked about Jimmer. There was some little added additions afterwards. You know, a big giant guy. I don't know, who am I talking about?
Boban Marjanovic.
Yeah. Exactly. That's how dead it is right now. But yeah, exactly. But look, here they are. They got the roster. This seemingly looks like the team they're going to go to war with next season. It seems to be over. What are the pros that we've seen? What are the good things from this offseason?
The good things, I mean, I think yeah, at the NBA Summer League, you saw a lot of development from Kyle Anderson, and then you have a lot of unknowns. A guy like Jonathan Simmons, who got a guaranteed deal right before the Summer League tournament started, and then even like the Becky Hammond story. You know, she went out there, she went out 5-1 to win the Summer League tournament. So I think as far as the younger players off the bench, you got a lot of hopefuls coming in.
Right. Yeah, obviously, the biggest splash in the offseason for the Spurs was LaMarcus Aldridge. Right below that would be David West, re-signing TD, Tim Duncan, Manu, and Danny, and so on and so forth. But are there any cons? Is there anything bad about what this team looks like right now?
Definitely there's unknowns such as the chemistry, how they're going to mesh. There's a lot of new guys, Ray McCallum coming in, like Boban, Jonathan Simmons, if they get court time, how they're going to mesh, how they're going to pick up the system. How long is it going to take for them to mesh is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, this is a bench that's gotten a lot younger, a little more experienced. Winston's talking about McCallum. You got Boban. You got possibly Jimmer. Is this a situation, Paul, where this team just needs to like really ride their starters before the bench gets going? Because with that unit last year, that was almost another starting unit coming in. Yeah. This one doesn't have that same feel to it.
I think they're going to have to, you want to keep those guys fresh. Pop's going to obviously manage the minutes for Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, the elder guys on the roster. And I think you just got to look for guys like Boris Diaw, who have been on the bench, Manu Ginobili, just the staples to kind of guide those young guys. You know, it's going to be, I'm going to say from November to about January, it's going to be, it might be a little rough with that bench as far as figuring out where the roles are. You lost Corey Joseph, a guy who's been in the system for 4 years, Marco Bellinelli, a 2-year system player, Aaron Baines, 3 years. I mean, these are you just don't get that back on the first game of the season. So it's going to take a little while. Pop will have to be patient. These guys, he's going to give them some minutes and different opportunities and roles and see how they form.
Winston, I know the last show we joked about Thiago Splitter, how you're missing him or something, but is there one player this offseason that the team lost, and that you're sitting back, that hurt?
I really don't think they lost anybody that is going to be a big piece that they already haven't fixed.
Right.
I don't like the space that they kind of have behind Kawhi. I mean, there's not really a legitimate 3 right behind him. But as far as the pieces they have now, I think they have what they need to work.
That is a good point. The weakness probably right now would be who backs up Kawhi Leonard. How much pressure is on Jonathan Simmons for that spot?
It's on Simmons, but also with Kyle Anderson. I think Anderson's the guy who's the 3. In Vegas, he had the ball in his hands. They let him basically run the team. But when he's in San Antonio, he's going to be the 4th or 5th option on offense. He's not going to be the guy that they give the ball to and say, go get us buckets. He has to be that guy who has to be like a spot-up shooter or create for himself. So there's a big test there. But then also Simmons, he showed he was really good at the pick and roll. And I really think by the time March comes, you're going to figure out either Anderson or Simmons will have that roster spot
you would think that maybe Anderson has at least the foot in the door for that spot. Mm-hmm. He has a year with the Spurs. He played a lot in Austin with the Toros, and then he shined at the Vegas Summer League. And he won the MVP.
He won the MVP of the league
out there. But there's another player that was picked up in the offseason, Jimmer Fredette. Go crazy, people. Jimmer's coming, at least for now, temporarily.
Jimmer Mania.
Jimmer Mania hit San Antonio, and here it is. He has kind of had an up-and-down NBA career, not really stable. Hasn't really been the player we saw in college. But what can he do to get at least a guaranteed spot in San Antonio?
I think 2 things. Got to make his shots. He's out there because he's a shooter. I say all of Gary Naylor, he's an undersized 2-guard. And then defensively, he's always going to be a liability, but if he can just figure out the Spurs' team defensive concepts as far as when a guy beats you off the dribble, as far as when to provide help, if he can show a stable type of production in those few minutes that he gets in training camp and also in the preseason, then I think that he might have a shot. I mean, I really think it's a long shot just because San Antonio traditionally leaves that 15th spot open throughout the year until about January and March, and they finally fill it just to have some insurance in an open spot in case somebody gets hurt. But if he really has a good training camp, there's no telling
now on the Spurs cast, the Project Spurs podcast, that is, you go out to ProjectSpurs.com and check it out there. You had a healthy debate with the host, Aaron Prime, about that. Now, what was his rebuttal? Why was he all for it?
He was all for it. He was defending Jimmer as far as because in a way he has a good point. He says, Jimmer's not a guy who's going to make $5 million, $6 million this year. He's only going to make about $800 to $900,000, which if he gets that guaranteed spot right after training camp, if you do have to cut him to open up another spot, then eating $800 or $900,000 isn't a lot compared to eating $5 or $6 million. So in a way, he is almost like it's not really a huge gamble to have him as that 15th roster guy.
But what about that spacing that he can create? I mean, if he starts knocking down shots, that's some deadly space for you to have for Tim Duncan, LaMarcus Aldridge, even a guy like Boris Diaw.
It's a big if, though. I mean, I don't see I think his lack of athleticism is going to be big.
But how were they able to do that with a guy like Gary Neal in the past? Gary Neal wasn't super athletic.
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking of that about a shooter, there is a spot open because you lost the departure of Marco Bellinelli. That's 22 minutes, a guy who shot almost 40% from three the last 2 years. And so if Jimmer can hit those shots, but I mean, like Winston was saying last year in New Orleans, who has Anthony Davis and some productive pieces, he shot 18% on the year. He really struggled. He couldn't fit in with the Chicago
But of course,
Bulls.
Against San Antonio, he shoots lights out in that
22
game.
Points
22 points against San Antonio.
But in Sacramento, 2 years ago, he really showed the ability to knock down some shots. But again, he had the ball in his hands. They were a team that's all over the place. They don't have a lot of structure at that point. So I mean, it's going to be interesting. Like I said, if he makes his shots, he might have a chance.
And you're looking at this roster right now: LaMarcus Aldridge, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Danny Green, Kyle Anderson, David West, Boris Diaw, McCollum. The list goes on and on. The question now is: are they the favorites, despite losing in the first round to the Clippers?
I think they're the favorites
over Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, it was kind of a fluke year. I mean, the Clippers and the Spurs in the first round. I mean, who would have thought that would have happened? That knocks out the Spurs, obviously. It was just the easier route, I think, for Golden State. I don't think they're going to have the same easy path as they're going to this coming up year, especially with the Spurs.
Are they the heavy favorites, or are they just the favorites?
I think Golden State's the favorite coming in day one, just because they have basically almost 14 guys from that championship winning team. They just lost David Lee. That was the only piece. The Spurs, the Clippers, who brought a lot of new pieces. Teams that got the Thunder. These teams all have to, go through those first few months of figuring it out from November to January. I'd say after February, where all these teams stand, that's when you kind of reevaluate the power rankings in terms of who's the favorite. But yeah, I definitely think San Antonio, Los Angeles, Houston, those teams are right there with Golden State. And this coming year, the West is so deep now that everybody's healthy that you could have Golden State.
Southwest Division alone, they all can make the playoffs.
In round one, you could have Golden State, OKC, you could have Golden State, San Antonio. That's how crazy this is going to be coming up in the Western Conference with all these teams.
What do you think?
I think that I'm just looking at the finals. Golden State struggled with basically playing just against LeBron. I don't see them coming out of the West again.
And they say
here's some locker room material for you, Golden State Warrior fans. Want to say that again?
I don't see you guys coming out of the West again.
There you go. All right. Well, I think they're coming out of the West. I think the Spurs will win it all. I mean, I just look on paper and I look at the team, the matchups. The Spurs have that size advantage on Golden State, and I think that's going to be ultimately Golden State's too. Yeah, exactly. But before we wrap up, I know we're going up against the clock here. Summer League. You were out there along with Jose Grijalva of ProjectSpurs.com. Real briefly, you talked about Anderson, you talked about Simmons, Hammond. What was the feel for it? Any other players that may have stood out? What about the draft pick Lillane?
I mean, there was Caddy Lillane, a guy named Yusu Ndoye, who's actually going to get a training camp invite, and then a guy named Travion Graham. So the interesting thing here is that if San Antonio, they still have about 4 more spots open on that training camp roster. If they bring these guys over and they do end up cutting them before the season starts, you can, if they sign D-League contracts, you can put them in Austin. So you can have a guy like Caddy Lillane, Yusu Ndoye, Travion Graham, if they get him.
What were your thoughts on Lillane, though? I mean, you heading into the Summer League, you really had high hopes on him.
Yeah, he was a little raw. I mean, he's very raw. He's not ready yet. He's a good defensive rebounder. He likes to shoot a lot.
Now what about Bertans' brother, Darius? I heard he did pretty well.
He did. In the Utah Summer League, he did well. He kind of faded in Vegas. Then he had to go. He had to get married, so he left Summer League early.
You got to do that. When you got a wife waiting for you, you got to take off again.
Yeah, the Spurs granted him permission to leave early Summer League, and in Vegas he kind of struggled. He didn't make his shots, but I mean he looked pretty good as far as what he did in Utah.
What do you think about Simmons? Do you think he has a shot?
I think he does have a shot. His athleticism and
That's crazy, isn't it?
And he's just aggressive, which he's going to need at the next level. So.
Yeah. And real quick, I know we're going to miss the clock. I've got to get this in here right now. The Team France, Tony Parker, they're playing right now, correct?
Yes, Tony Parker and Boris Diaw are gearing up for Eurobasket in September.
And they lost, right?
They lost. Tony Parker lost to Finland, but that's because Boris Diaw and Nicholas Batum were in Africa doing the Team NBA game down there.
All right, so keep it tuned in that. Everything at ProjectSpurs.com. We'll be covering Team France. And who else is going to be playing out there?
Boban Marjanovic might play with Serbia.
So you can get a quick glimpse at the Spurs' future, especially with that monster, that beast guy. Yeah, he's a giant. But yeah, go to ProjectSpurs.com for all things Spurs during this offseason. And yep, it's the doldrums right now, but if it's out there, we'll find it. So for Paul Garcia and Winston Harris, I'm Jeff Garcia. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Spurs Roundtable.